Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into something that casts such a long shadow over so many women's lives. I'm talking about the pervasive influence of beauty standards.
Yeah, and we've gathered some, really compelling material for you. Everything from deeply personal stories to rigorous psychological research, media analysis, and even perspectives from different parts of the world.
Right, and central to all this is this concept of beauty sickness.
Exactly. That's the term for when, a woman's emotional energy gets overwhelmingly tied up in how she looks. It sort of blocks her from fully engaging with other really vital parts of her life.
So our mission in this deep dive is to really unpack how deeply ingrained these pressures are, starting, surprisingly, almost from childhood.
And to explore the real costs, right, what women pay, essentially, as they move through life because of this.
Yeah, we want to dissect the cultural forces driving this beauty sickness and, importantly, see if we can identify some pathways toward, a healthier way of seeing ourselves.
Okay, so let's start with just how early this kicks in. It's actually quite startling. There's data showing 40% of girls aged just 5 to 9 already wish they were thinner.
Wow, 5 years old. That's incredibly young.
It is. And it shows how quickly these societal values about body size get absorbed, even before kids really understand health or anything like that. It suggests we need to focus on positive self-image way earlier, separate from appearance.
Before they've even lost all their baby teeth.
And it gets even more worrying. Nearly a third of third-grade girls report being always afraid of becoming fat.
Right, and the crucial thing here for these young kids, this isn't about being healthy. It's tied directly to this idea that thinness is necessary to be seen as pretty.
We even have this story about a 7-year-old Lee. She learned the word fat from YouTube.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder, isn't it, how early and, through what unexpected channels these standards reach girls.
Absolutely. And Lee, she's already kind of aware of these, what she calls princess-level impossible standards.
Which is quite perceptive for her age. But what really struck me was her initial feeling. She felt that what her body does, running, playing, that's way more important than just how it looks.
Which is such a healthy, natural perspective for a child.
Really.
Right?
But then there's this hesitation. When asked if she'll always feel that way, she says, "I'm not sure."
Yeah. That little bit of uncertainty really hints at the powerful influence these cultural pressures are likely going to have as she gets older.
Okay, so let's dig into this idea of beauty sickness a bit more.
No.
What are the sort of core elements?
Well, at its heart, beauty sickness is when a really disproportionate amount of a woman's emotional energy, her attention, gets fixated on her physical appearance.
Oh, okay.
And this intense focus, it genuinely hinders her ability to concentrate on other things. Her talents, ambitions, relationships, all the other essential parts of a fulfilling life. It's like a major internal distraction fueled by society's emphasis on looks.
And this isn't some niche issue affecting just a few women, right?
Oh, definitely not. It affects a really broad spectrum of women across all ages, all walks of life. It's not something women just sort of outgrow without effort. Challenging it often takes conscious, sustained work.
So what's driving it? I mean, looking at all our sources, what seems to be the biggest force pushing this focus on women's appearance? Are there, contradictions in what the sources say?
It seems largely fueled by a culture that consistently values women primarily for their looks. Often it overshadows their achievements, their intelligence, anything else they bring to the table.
Yeah.
And this gets constantly reinforced through media images, obviously, but also the language we use, in everyday chat about ourselves and other women. Even seemingly harmless compliments that only focus on looks play a part.
It feels like a cycle you get trapped in.
Precisely. And the consequences, they're really far-reaching. Beauty sickness isn't just skin deep. It actively contributes to negative mental health outcomes, things like depression, anxiety, and on a really practical level, it's a huge drain on women's time, energy, and money. Resources diverted away from achieving their goals, from living the lives they actually want.
You mentioned media's powerful role. Can you give us some specific examples of how this relentless focus on appearance plays out there?
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, there are loads. Think about Seth MacFarlane's opening song at the Oscars a while back, "We Saw Your Boobs." Literally cataloging movies based on actresses getting naked.
Wow, I remember that. Pretty blatant.
Right. Or look at the immediate, intense pressure on Kate Middleton to lose baby weight super fast. And then when she did, she got criticized for looking too good too soon. It's a complete catch-22.
It really is. And it's not just famous people under the microscope, is it? This scrutiny hits people in all sorts of professions.
Not at all. Take Heidi Stevens, a respected journalist. She faced this barrage of unsolicited critical comments just about her hair, with people questioning her credibility because of it.
Seriously, her hair.
Yeah. Then you have, like, the New York Times running a piece focused on women wanting curvier asses, complete with a pretty suggestive photo. It's hard to imagine men's bodies being discussed quite like that. So these external pressures are huge, but then they also get internalized, which is maybe even more insidious.
And these aren't just isolated incidents, are they?
Far from it. We saw the story of Gillette Breen, a blogger who shared a happy wedding anniversary photo and just got hit with this torrent of hateful comments about her weight.
It's awful.
It really underscores how women's bodies seem to become public property, constantly up for assessment and judgment by anyone.
It's like those external messages just seep in and become your own internal critic.
Yeah.
We have that account from Artemis who felt pretty sure she was fat, even when people told her she wasn't.
That's such a powerful illustration of how deep these beliefs can run. Like she said, it's like in my brain. Rationally, she might know it's not logical, but the feeling just sticks.
And this preoccupation, it's not just a passing thought for many, is it?
For Artemis, and yeah, for countless women, it's almost constant. All day, she said. It affects everything, from getting dressed to feeling comfortable hanging out with friends.
Yeah.
And what's really disheartening is when women feel they can't even focus on their goals, or, as she put it, work on their brain, until they feel their body is right.
It's like the mirror becomes this huge barrier, something you have to fix before you can properly engage with life. It makes me think of that phrase, the toxic swamp of messages about women's bodies, just diverting attention from their ambitions.
That's a really good way to put it. And as we've seen, this isn't a gender-neutral problem by any stretch. The difference in beauty sickness between men and women is significant. Women consistently report much more body dissatisfaction.
And the way women often end up seeing their own bodies can be quite
fragmented, right? Absolutely. It often turns into this internal running commentary, a catalog of appearance complaints. Scrutinizing one body part after another, usually finding fault. It's almost like the body itself becomes this enemy that needs constant managing and controlling.
This relentless focus, both from outside and inside, it leads us to this concept of objectification. What does that really mean in this context?
Well, objectification basically is being treated like a thing, an object, rather than a whole person with, thoughts, feelings, abilities. You kind of lose your sense of internal reality, your own subjective experience, when your main value is seen as your appearance.
So your intellect, ambitions, character, they all just fade into the background.
Or get ignored entirely.
Yeah. We have Erin's really powerful story. She developed early as a young girl and started getting unwanted sexual attention because of it. Her reaction was to hide her body, dressing in boys' clothes.
And it's so important to understand that wasn't about her gender identity. It was a direct response to being sexualized way too young. She became hyper-aware of how her body might be seen, even just playing. That constant internal monitoring she described. It's heartbreaking for a kid.
It really shows how just being in a female body can become so complicated, even feel unsafe. Her mom's explanation that it wasn't about who Erin was, but about the danger of being perceived as a woman in a certain way, that's a heavy thing.
It is. That lesson that looking like a woman could mean being unsafe, that's a terrible burden. But it reflects the reality for so many girls. This constant scrutiny women often face in public can lead to feeling like just a part and not a person.
Yeah.
Erin's decision later to shave her head and ditch makeup was this deliberate attempt to step outside of the game, she said. And amazingly, it actually reduced the street harassment she experienced.
Wow. It's almost like she had to erase those conventional markers of femininity just to be seen as a whole person, not primarily as a sexual object. But it's also true that objectification isn't always felt negatively, is it?
That's a really crucial nuance.
Yeah.
There are times when it might be welcomed or even sought out, like someone crafting a specific going out look for a party. In certain contexts, it can feel, sexy or even powerful.
So it's more like a spectrum, not just good or bad.
Exactly. It's not black and white. But even in those situations where it feels less harmful, that underlying dynamic of being primarily looked at instead of seen can still be, unsettling.
You shared that personal story about the student evaluation in your psychology of gender class focusing on your skirt, not your teaching. That must have been incredibly frustrating and ironic.
Oh, it was deeply frustrating.
Yeah.
And ironic given the topic. It just left me feeling intensely looked at. And the reaction from male colleagues kind of dismissing it like, it's just a compliment. that really highlighted how differently these things are often experienced.
Right. And this constant feeling of being viewed, judged on appearance, that can then turn inward, right? Leading to what psychologists call self-objectification. What is that exactly?
Self-objectification is basically when you internalize that outside observer's perspective. You start evaluating yourself primarily based on how you look. Your own body becomes this collection of parts to be constantly assessed against beauty standards.
We heard Rebecca talk about her body becoming this collection of parts for evaluation, leading her into this relentless cycle of monitoring food and exercise.
And what's so damaging about that is the sheer amount of mental space it eats up. Rebecca talked about having a constant calorie meter running in her head. That's incredibly valuable brain power, just constantly being diverted from everything else.
Yeah, and the research backs this up, doesn't it? Showing that people who habitually monitor their bodies are more easily distracted, report lower motivation, less self-efficacy. It really acts as a barrier.
It absolutely does. If your mental focus is always drifting back to, how do I look? It's inevitably being pulled away from, what can I do? What do I want to achieve? How do I want to connect with the world?
Even something as simple as clothing choices can reinforce this self-objectification. I remember being pulled off as a kid for doing somersaults in a dress. I learned really early to connect being ladylike with being kind of passive, always aware of how my body looked to others.
That's such a powerful early lesson in body monitoring, isn't it? And the reality is, clothes marketed for girls and women are often just more restrictive, less practical than boys' and men's clothes. It reinforces that awareness of appearance and can limit physical freedom.
You contrast that with something like cargo pants, all about comfort, function, movement, and then you have those huge fashion moments like J-Lo's green Versace dress. The focus instantly becomes just about her body.
Totally. The dress becomes the story, right? Often overshadowing anything else she might have been doing or saying at the time.
And this intense focus on appearance can even mess with how women see their own physical abilities. That One Like a Girl ad, while trying to be empowering, sort of accidentally highlighted this really sad perception that running like a girl means you're not good at it.
Yeah, it tapped into that damaging stereotype of girls being like ornaments rather than instruments. And self-objectification feeds directly into that disconnect, the gap between how women see their bodies and what their bodies can actually do.
There was that study showing girls with higher self-objectification actually performed worse at throwing a softball.
Right. A clear example of how focusing on appearance can literally get in the way of physical action.
And Rebecca's story as a competitive swimmer, following bad diet advice from Self magazine because she was so focused on looking a certain way, it actually led her towards anorexia and hurt her swimming because she wasn't fueling properly.
Such a tragic illustration of that point.
In Erin, becoming hyper-aware of her body's movements after puberty, feeling embarrassed, it just reinforced her decision to dress in a way that hid her body. It's also tangled together.
It really is this complex web. And as women get older, these beauty standards don't just disappear. They often morph into new anxieties. Rebecca talked really poignantly about her anxiety around aging, feeling like her peak beauty is already fading.
That's such a sad and pervasive message our culture sends, that women's power and worth are tied to youth and a specific look. There's a sense of injustice, like women are somehow declining before they even hit middle age.
Absolutely. And Rebecca's desire to consciously shift her focus, towards her character, her relationships as she ages, that's such a vital and healthy response. Anna echoed that too, expressing real anger at the cultural message that a woman's worth boils down to how sexy or nice she looks.
And all this mental energy spent on body monitoring, on evaluating, it's a huge loss. It actively stops women from putting their focus on things they actually care about.
Precisely. It's time we collectively try to reclaim that mental space. Now, there's this really problematic idea that feeling bad about your body, experiencing body shame, might actually motivate weight loss or other changes.
Yeah, you mentioned your colleague asking if feeling bad about weight gain is maybe a good thing. That's jarring.
It's deeply flawed and ultimately really harmful. Shame is such a complex and damaging emotion. It's rooted in feeling inadequate, like you've exposed some unacceptable part of yourself. It gets tied up with cultural norms and makes you hyper-focused on how others might be judging you.
We heard about specific triggers for shame from Gabrielle, Artemis, Sophia, things like leaving the house without makeup, catching a reflection, street harassment.
And MK's story, the constant negative comments about her body from her parents. Being told she had the body of a 50-year-old, her face was too fat. That kind of relentless criticism from caregivers can do profound, lasting damage.
Even things that seem like harmless entertainment can carry these messages, like Daphne's weight gain being portrayed as a punishment for vanity in that Scooby-Doo movie, Franken Creepy. What kind of lesson is that for young girls?
Exactly. And the research is really clear here. Shame is not an effective way to promote healthy changes. Negative comments about weight actually make young women less likely to exercise and more likely to overeat as a coping mechanism.
Wow, so it backfires.
Completely. It's also strongly linked to things like bulimic behaviors and makes other unhealthy eating patterns worse as people try to manage emotional distress.
And just the act of dieting itself can become all-consuming, right? Leading to this intense preoccupation with food, extreme strategies that just interfere with living your life.
The key point is, any real health intervention needs to focus on caring for your body, respecting it, not on loathing it. It's incredibly hard to consistently take care of something you fundamentally despise.
And the link between body shame and mental health is really significant, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Body shame is strongly associated with both everyday depressed moods and clinical depression. And that noticeable increase in depression rates among girls compared to boys during adolescence. It strongly suggests a connection to how teenage girls are thinking about their bodies in relation to all these societal pressures.
It makes me think back to your regret about not addressing that client's feeling of being looked at more directly. Maybe that was a huge part of her depression.
It's very possible. For MK, years of body shaming directly contributed to eating disorders, depression, anxiety. The sheer amount of brain space just eaten up by constant body monitoring and self-criticism, it has huge consequences for mental well-being.
It's heartbreaking to think how MK's life might have been different if she'd had self-esteem, if she hadn't had that constant inner critic.
It's a sobering thought. And beyond the emotional and mental toll, beauty sickness takes a very real, tangible toll on women's practical resources, their time and their money. It's like a literal thief.
We heard about your friend Bill's Dust Bowl empiricism study analyzing personality tests, finding that women's responses were much more strongly correlated with beauty concerns than men's.
Yeah, it's another piece of evidence showing just how much women's thoughts and lives are shaped by these concerns, often without even fully realizing it.
And then there's Jess's story from that party. The guys seemed effortless in their clothes while she felt all this pressure and self-consciousness. That need to get her look right actually stole her enjoyment and cost her more time and money.
And you see that in professional settings, too. Think about job interviews. The number of choices, the level of awareness about appearance, it's often vastly different for women compared to men.
It's like this hidden gender gap in time and money spent on beauty that we don't talk about as much as the pay gap, but it's a real economic factor.
It absolutely is. Your anecdote about skipping the eyebrow shaping with students, it highlights that resistance to adding another beauty task to the list. And just tracking your own beauty spending for a month can be incredibly eye-opening.
That contrast you mentioned, a young female student spending nearly $5,000 a year versus a male student spending maybe $50, that's staggering.
It really is. And the constant bombardment of images showing women wearing makeup on TV, social media, it can blur the line between wanting to use products and feeling like you have to, just to look acceptable or professional.
Jamie's perspective, comparing the U.S. and South Korea, the pressure for double eyelids, the surgeries, it shows how these standards operate globally, even if the specifics vary.
Right, the core gendered nature of the pressure often remains. And Jess's observation at that startup, female colleagues taking work time for makeup touch-ups before cocktails while men kept working. That's a perfect example of the beauty time gap impacting productivity.
And you mentioned other examples, female news anchors needing way more time for hair and makeup than male anchors, more demanding wardrobes. Those little bits of time really add up.
They absolutely do. Now, we can't really talk about beauty sickness without tackling the media head-on. Its power in shaping and, frankly, distorting beauty standards for women is just breathtaking. The current beauty climate is not natural.
You pointed out 3 big problems with media images of women. They're unreal and unrepresentative. They constantly pair a certain look with success and happiness, and they frequently objectify women.
Exactly. Sasha's story with that Bobbi Brown makeup book is so telling. It promised to teach her how to look like a woman, which she understood meant a white woman. Her feelings of failure and embarrassment when she couldn't achieve that.
Yeah, it fosters that feeling that other women have some secret superpower to always look perfect.
And then you contrast Western ideals with Fiji, where historically larger bodies were preferred. Ann Becker's research showed this dramatic shift after TV arrived. Body image issues soared. Eating disorders emerged among teen girls. It's a stark example of media's impact.
And the outrage over things like that disturbing Dolce & Gabbana ad or the headless woman of Hollywood Tumblr, they really highlight the dehumanizing way women are often portrayed.
And it has real consequences. Research shows even brief exposure to objectifying media can make men minimize sexual assault, view women more as objects for action than as agents themselves.
Sasha's longing to be like Kimberly, that idealized blonde white girl from the magazines, and then her powerful realization that it wasn't her, followed by that image of her destroying the magazines. It speaks to the strength needed to break free.
It really does. And now, social media has just amplified everything exponentially. Online images trigger constant comparison, and sometimes seeing peers, even though their photos are curated too, feels like a more relevant and maybe more deceptively achievable standard than celebrities.
Maria talked about always comparing herself, even before social media really took off. It shows how deep that comparative mindset can run. And the sheer time many women spend on social media just intensifies the impact of those idealized images.
Absolutely. And all the commentary on women's appearance online, positive or negative, it just reinforces the idea that looks are paramount and fair game for public discussion. Then you have fitspiration and thinspiration sites, which often end up shaming people more than inspiring them. They frequently feature sexualized poses and promote really dangerous eating habits.
Maria saying she was thankful Instagram wasn't big when she was younger. That says a lot about its potential to worsen self-image issues. Her constant self-criticism in photos, anxiety about unflattering tag pics, so many women relate to that.
And her using her demanding job as a sort of temporary permission slip, not to focus on being pretty. It just highlights what a burden these standards feel like. The research on appearance shaming online, especially targeting women with nasty sexualized tweets about weight, it's disturbing.
The existence of things like Fat Shaming Day, it shows how cruel the online environment can be. I love your no skinny arms. Rule for lab photos, prioritizing capturing real moments over fake ideals.
It's about actively shifting focus. And Maria consciously curating her feed, unfollowing triggering accounts, focusing on living her life instead of creating a cool narrative that's a really proactive, empowering move.
So with all these pressures, what are the potential solutions? Media literacy often comes up.
Yeah, Sarah's story about becoming more media literate in high school is encouraging. How it changed her perception of media's impact. Recognizing how media shapes us can be a turning point.
And her earlier experience, getting praise only for her looks, making her feel that was her main value, that's sadly common.
So important to praise girls for their smarts, kindness, bravery, curiosity, not just looks.
Definitely.
So media literacy helps us be less passive consumers. But we have to be realistic. It's helpful, especially early on, but it's not a magic bullet. Research shows even women who are highly critical of idealized images still engage in negative social comparison.
Right, that paradoxical effect, criticizing thin models, might even be followed by a stronger desire to be that thin.
Exactly. So if media literacy isn't the whole answer, what about things like the real beauty campaigns we see more of now? Are they more effective?
You started that section with that beauty sickness fairy tale, the woman looking in the mirror, feeling dissatisfied. It captures that common feeling so well.
And the issue with many of these campaigns, fundamentally, is that just telling women they are beautiful, while maybe well-intentioned, doesn't usually build lasting confidence or change deep-seated negative views. It still keeps the focus squarely on appearance.
Like the Dove Real Beauty campaign. Even with diverse bodies, the billboards asking people to judge women's looks, it still centers the conversation on how women look, doesn't it?
It does. And Beth's story, only getting compliments on her cute eyes or long eyelashes as a kid, feeling frustrated she wasn't seen as funny or brave, that resonates here. Her later perspective, that you should work to be better, not rely on prettiness, that's insightful.
And that study where compliments about appearance often led to self-deprecating responses, not genuine positive feelings. It really highlights the limits of just focusing on looks for self-esteem.
It does. Plus, we have to remember our deep evolutionary roots, our sensitivity to beauty. We just didn't evolve to handle the constant onslaught of perfected, often unattainable images we face today.
So, if focusing just on external beauty isn't the path, where should we be looking? How do we shift the focus?
Well, Marina's attempts to counter her mom's focus on appearance, using humor and sarcasm, show some interpersonal strategies. But her conscious decision to actively fight an appearance-based view of herself, linking her worth to her character instead, that's a key shift.
That self-affirmation, I'm an acceptable human being even if I have a couple extra pounds.
Yeah.
It's simple but powerful reframing. And Stephanie's reflection on her grandmother's different concern for girls' faces versus boys, it shows how deep these gendered beliefs run.
It really underscores the pervasive gendered nature of this focus. And Stephanie growing up, hearing women constantly critique their own and others' bodies, it shows how these harmful messages get passed down, often unintentionally.
Which brings us to fat talk and body shaming among women. That dialogue example you gave really caught the awkwardness and negativity.
And the research might is 90% of adult women doing it occasionally. And it rarely makes anyone feel better. The fact that so many women feel they should say negative things about themselves when trying on clothes with friends, it's pervasive.
It's almost like this weird social ritual, even though it's counterproductive. The idea that women might feel pressure to put themselves down just to fit in with other women is really disheartening.
It is. And research also points to the open hostility some women show when judging other women's bodies, linking that to disordered eating and distress. The fact that we have both fat shaming and terms like skinny bitches shows the pressure at both ends.
Nick's plea to just be careful with comments about bodies, even compliments, such an important reminder. And Stephanie consciously trying not to do body talk in front of her daughter Ella, breaking that cycle she experienced while realizing her own mom probably meant well too. That's powerful.
It really boils down to being mindful of our language, the messages we send ourselves and others. Practicing not voicing every negative body thought, gently challenging it when others do. That can make a difference. Ultimately, it's about focusing on what actually matters, beyond looks, and treating our bodies kindly.
And consciously opting out of media that constantly scores women based on appearance. That's another key step. So how can women actively build empowerment based on something deeper than looks?
Amy's perspective, joking about being built to last, but also acknowledging the anger at not fitting ideals that captures the complexity. And her history of dieting from a young age is sadly common.
That idea of self-objectification, disconnecting women from what their bodies can do, diminishing respect for the body as a resource.
That online intervention you mentioned, shifting focus from appearance-based thoughts to utilization-focused ones, appreciating what the body can do, that seems really promising. And Amy's reaction to failing the obstacle course, immediately blaming her weight despite her friend's support, shows how deep those beliefs go.
But then that shift realizing your cut meant muscle definition, not a flaw. That's huge. And her focus on achieving physical goals, hiking the Grand Canyon, the Wonderland Trail, that's truly inspiring.
It shows the power of shifting focus from appearance to capability. And Jodie's shock at that hypersexualized, lovely Lola doll. It's a reminder of the unhealthy messages still aimed at young girls.
So important to be critical of toys and media for kids. Choose things that promote broader skills and values. Now, exercise often comes up regarding body image, but it's complex, right? Gym culture, advertising.
Absolutely. That awful incident with the Playboy Playmate shaming a woman in the locker room. A stark reminder that judgment based on looks happens even in places meant for health.
But then you have Hannah's positive body image, crediting her family where diverse bodies were normal, where criticizing herself meant criticizing loved ones. That's a much healthier model. And intuitive eating, listening to your body's cues, can foster a better relationship with your body too.
And the research is clear. Mom's body dissatisfaction strongly influences their daughter's body image and engagement in beauty culture early on. Parental modeling is critical.
So it's clear that even with the best intentions, pushing back against beauty sickness is tough, given media and early social messages prioritizing girls' looks. And, as we said, compliments just about appearance don't really help long term. They just remind you looks matter.
Which is exactly why self-compassion is so crucial. Treating yourself with the kindness you'd give a struggling friend, that's proving far more effective for positive body image and well-being than chasing some beauty ideal. That study where women wrote loving letters to their bodies, the results were remarkable. Much higher body satisfaction, better mood.
Those letter excerpts were incredibly moving. Self-acceptance, appreciating function, letting go of appearance-based criticism.
Truly inspiring. And Colleen's journey overcoming an eating disorder fueled by beauty sickness, then redirecting all that energy into making a positive impact. It shows what's possible when you reclaim that focus.
Her childhood annoyance at only getting compliments on her eyes, wanting recognition for other qualities, it hits that point again. And remembering feeling comfortable in her body before puberty brought all the societal expectations. Poignant. Her regret about worrying about her stomach in a photo during a life-changing trip highlights the triviality of those concerns.
Her experience in that college jogging class, triggering unhealthy focus on weight and BMI, so common, sadly. But her shift, from exercising to control her body to finding genuine joy in community and fitness, and then becoming an instructor, promoting non-objectified approaches, creating training programs. That's transformative.
And her core message: your dreams and desires are more important than what society's expectations of you are.
So fundamental. Okay, as we wrap up, what are some concrete steps listeners can take?
Well, first, the goal isn't necessarily ditching all beauty practices. It's about being deliberate, making sure they don't overshadow more important things. Maybe keeping a simple journal of time and money spent on beauty just to see. It can be revealing.
Even small changes, like choosing comfortable clothes instead of suffering, like those homecoming dresses, can free up significant brain space without sacrificing feeling good.
And supporting activism that pushes for better media representation, like the shift with GoDaddy ads. It shows change can happen. And thinking about gifts for girls, choosing things that foster bravery, curiosity, skills, not just prettiness.
Absolutely. Consciously promoting messages that value girls and women for their whole selves.
This deep dive has really shown the profound, often sneaky ways beauty sickness impacts women's lives, draining time, energy, potential.
And reclaiming that energy, that focus, it's just crucial. Not just for individual well-being, but so women can contribute fully, bring all their talents to the world.
Colleen's message really sticks. Your dreams and desires are more important than what society's expectations of you are. She calls it a radical act, but also simple, achievable.
It truly is. So maybe the question to leave you with is this. What's one small step you can take starting today to push back against beauty sickness in your own life or maybe in the lives of those around you? How can you make a little more space for the things that really matter?